Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Hey, my brothers back again. This is just a quick one. You know what? Listening to Sergeant Willie Pete's latest, and I see why. His rambles are okay. If he's just doing his free flow rants or rambles, it's okay. But when he starts trying to debate during his rambles, I see why I get triggered. I get triggered when somebody gives inaccurate information, and I pause. And my limit is usually about 5. If you're going on a ramble or you're going on a rant and you give about 5 in something that I know is inaccurate, okay, something that I know is inaccurate, I get triggered, and it's hard for me to listen. And it's hard for me to listen to people that spit inaccurate facts just to support their position. I know in the first 5 minutes I counted, just the ones that I know that are absolutely slapdash dead wrong. I counted at least 5 or 6 in the first 5 minutes of facts that he gave out as to support his argument that were absolutely dead wrong. When he, the biggest one, man, I had to just shut it off when he talked about Haiti and the Haitian Revolution, saying that men and women fought side by side. Bullshit. Okay. Bullshit. Okay. Number one, they didn't want women in the sugar fields. Okay. So basically 80%, it had to be at least 80% men were actually sent to Dominica. Why? Because women could not survive the work. If I'm not mistaken, I have to pull my facts, but the average survivability rate for the average male in the sugarcane fields was about 6 to 7 years. That's how come it was a high turnover. They had continued to go back and get slaves. That's how come most of the slaves that were shipped to the New World were actually shipped to the islands and the sugarcane fields. Why? Because the survivability rate was so low that you had to continually get a fresh crop of slaves in to train to work sugarcane fields. It was that bad. Same thing for the United States in sugarcane fields. Rice and sugar were absolutely miserable work. The diseases, the heat, the mosquitoes, the harsh work killed a lot of people. That's how come it was a little easier when cotton came in. Cotton was a little easier. But that brutal work in the sugarcane fields was so harsh, men didn't survive, much less women. But to talk about the Haitian Revolution remix, right? Men and women fought side by side, bullshit. There's one reason and one reason only. Well, several reasons. But the basic reason that the Haitian Revolution went off is because you had revolutions inside French. The Bastille falling, the turning over of the monarchy, of the kings, of the monarchy. The French Revolution, when you basically overturned the whole society. That helped the French Revolution. And then, since the survivability rate for white people was probably even lower than women, because most white people could not survive more than 2 years in country, in that environment. Still today, very few white people are in the subtropic or the tropical areas. Very few. There's a reason that you haven't had a whole lot of wars in sub-Saharan Africa or in Latin America. You haven't had a whole bunch of theater wars down there because white people don't survive, which is the reason that the mulatto class was actually put in charge. And it was the mulatto class that was put in charge. Those were your generals, Toussaint Louvertures and all them. Those were mulattoes. Those are the ones that put in charge. And once they decided that they had enough and they saw their opportunity for independence because of turmoil in France, they took it. And when you combine the turmoil in France, you can combine the lack of survivability of white people in that environment of Haiti, the sub-Saharan or subtropic environment, which basically is a swamp with the mosquitoes and the diseases. What the Haitians would do is when the troops landed, the French troops landed, they'd run up into the hills and they'd wait them out. And then when they got sick or weak, then they would run down and attack them, take the weapons, and then run back up into the hills. That's how the Haitians actually defeated the French, which is why Napoleon actually gave, the whole southern region. The whole Louisiana purchase, he just gave it up. Number one, he needed money to fight the English. Number two, he got tired of losing troops. It was the French's quagmire. It was France's Afghanistan. He got tired of losing troops. Even though Dominica or Haiti was the jewel of France, actually brought in more money than half the country. They had to give it up. They couldn't hold it. It's number one. Now, the second thing, even about Haiti, he's talking about when the Haitians got free. When the Haitians got free and got their freedom, they would have to have gone into a communistic environment, a communistic setup, right? That'd have been fine, except for one thing. If I'm not mistaken, Karl Marx wasn't born until 1821 or so. He didn't write the Communist Manifesto, I do believe, until like the 1840s, almost 1850s. I got to go back and check the dates. And communism as a political movement didn't start till the Paris Commune in 1871. So where you get this communist structure that Haiti could have adopted, that hadn't been even invented until damn near 60, 70 years later. Damn near 70 years. Yeah, damn near 60, 70 years later. And you remix this into what? Something else. That's how come you remix all this stuff into a narrative, because the facts don't match. If we pin you down to a fact, that's when your argument falls apart. But the thing is if you keep mixing and tap dancing, nobody notices it. But it triggered me. Every time you do that, it triggers me, because I know the stuff is not true. I read the stuff too much, read the stuff too long. I've played Dr. Claude Anderson's piece, an interview that I did, believe it or not, an interview that I did. And I played a portion of the interview I had with Dr. Claude Anderson about the fork in the road, and saying that 80 to 90% of the slaves imported to the United States were male. Females didn't start becoming imported into the United States until I do believe it was 1780, right after the Declaration of Independence, 1780, by Thomas Jefferson, because they wanted to. Virginia's land was getting overgrown, in other words, depleted, and so Thomas Jefferson in South Carolina had the scheme to actually breed slaves, coming to slave breeding states. Go read the American Slave Coast. That's how come when Thomas Jefferson got into office in 1808, he ended the external slave trade to get more money and more value out of the slaves that he was breeding. That's when they started importing more female slaves, because, in those 20 years between 1780 and 1808, they started importing more female slaves because they were starting to breed them and sell them off. And basically, especially after the Louisiana purchase, when Napoleon sold off Haiti, I do believe I think he sold them off 1814, something like that. I think that was maybe earlier than that. I think the Louisiana purchase was 1809 or something like that. I have to go back and look at the date where they sold it off. And so now you have all this new territory and that you need to make a profit off of. So you start exporting slaves to these areas, Mississippi, Louisiana, that ilk. Parts of the Midwest, start exporting slaves. That's why Claude Anderson gave this speech, Fork in the Road. Men and women were not equal. We didn't do equal work. It's a little bit better on the cotton fields and some other fields like tobacco, where women could do the work. When it got to rice and sugar and stuff down south, they could not do that work. Black women were basically there to breed children. That was their role. That was their worth. They were there to breed between 9 and 12 children. The fertility rate of black women was so high. The fertility rate for black women was like almost 10. on average. So that's where the matriarchal pattern started. It didn't start with us being poor. Basically, they didn't even start with us being together. We weren't together. They didn't bring black men and women together to get married. Now, did some of them get married? Sure. Did some of them form families? Sure. But they didn't import you to get married. They imported men to work and women to breed. There's a very good book called, it's not good. In fact, I hated the book, but it was actually accurate. It's called Black Women, Black Love, where she actually documents the relationship between black men and black women in slavery, after slavery, and through Jim Crow. After emancipation, white men, the North tried to force black men and black women into a patriarchal nuclear family, which did not work. Pattern never took. Pattern that we actually formed, which is the fat pattern we formed when we were in slavery, is what she calls the Africana Kinship Network, or what Dr. Johnson calls a gynopatestrial family arrangement. You have a broad, extended family where the woman could go from man to man, where a man was actually replaceable. That's been documented. Frazier, in the Negro family in the United States, said the exact same thing. Frazier had the biggest part of Frazier's book. Frazier had 5, damn near 6 chapters on the matriarchy, as he calls it, where he outlined the matriarchy, where he said that the woman was the head of the family, had nothing to do with wealth. That's the pattern that was formed in the slave cabin. That's what Frazier said. There's been other books that agreed with him. All the literature from then to now say the exact same thing. Had nothing to do with protection. You're enslaved. Most of the women that you know, you weren't, basically, they weren't part of your family. A lot of times, by the time you got, if you were a boy, by the time you got to be 7, 8, 9, you were sold off. You were never formed as a cohesive group. You were a slave class. You were a class of people. You were a chattel. And afterwards, when you did get emancipated, the North realized they had let go of their labor class that earned them so much money. 60 to 70% of the GDP of the United States was earned in the South through slavery. And if you freed them and you couldn't put them back to work somehow, you're going to go broke. So that's how come they let the KKK loose and put you back into semi-slavery, which is Jim Crow, which is just another way of talking about serfdom, something the Europeans desperately tried to escape from when they ran away from Europe. Serfs are just above slave. Serfs are just above an indentured. In fact, an indentured servant probably has more rights. That's come the book, Slavery by Another Name, is so impactful. In some ways, Jim Crow was worse than slavery. That's the pattern, and that's the environment that you were born under, that you endured under. If you look at the, if I'm not mistaken, the last I looked, if you looked at the average lifespan of a black male, up until I do believe 19, I do believe it was like between 31 and 35 years. Black men didn't live long. The racism, the hard work, the oppression killed a lot of black men. In fact, my uncles used to tell me, if you want to live a long life, you got to get out of the South. You won't live long in the South. You're going to die early. That's the environment that black people lived on. Did they try to get out of it? Did they try to make a better life? Yeah, they did. Did it work? Not if you are the designated underclass, because you're needed for labor, but you're resented by white people because you bring down the price of labor for them too. Which is why the so-called free states didn't want black people there, because they brought down the labor cost, just like we complain about Mexicans. So if we want to talk about it's all about the money, let's talk about the money. If we want to talk economics, let's talk economics. If we want to talk culture, let's talk culture. That is the pattern that you were born under. That is the pattern that your culture was forged under. You don't have an African culture. You don't really have a European culture. You have an American culture, forged and designed by the slave master. That's your culture. Your psychological patterns, the patterns of your women, the patterns of your men are actually forged through slavery and enforced and reinforced by Jim Crow and racism. There's an old saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And black women being white women's handmaidens rhymed at least 3 times that I know of. In 1860, when black men got the vote and feminism was actually started. In 1920, when white women got the vote and black women were championing them because they thought what they were going to get it. And guess what? You had to play Negro again. Go sit next to your man who can't vote because of the racism and the poll taxes and the other illegal stuff that was going on, even though you're a citizen. And the last time they got hoodwinked by the Gucci boots, when your man burned down 300 cities between 1963 and 1972 to get you economic rights, civil rights, economic rights, and legal rights. And you allowed Gucci-booted white women to come in and take 83% of it from you. That's the pattern that we're under. That pattern repeats itself. You can go back and document it. Get tired of reading goddamn slavery books. I've read about 10 or 11 of them. I'm reading Patterson's book about the Moynihan Report. And that motherfucker suggested about 10 more that I had to collect. But I'm going to say this, Sergeant Willie Pete, since you are the smartest man in the room, I'm going to say start citing your sources. I'm getting goddamn tired of people making up shit and making up facts and remixing facts that don't fit. I really am. It's starting to irritate the fuck out of me. If you got a plan, you got something, cite your sources, put it on paper so we can look at it. Now, you might be right. And if you are, I will wholeheartedly agree with you. But I'm getting tired of you remix Negroes. It's called everybody else magical, but you come up with magical facts and magical dates and magical ideas that don't fit. Who's more magical, me or you? I am a structural realist in philosophy. Green Gorilla is a naturalist. If it's not grounded in facts, I can't find it in a history book. I can't find it in the newspaper. It don't exist. You're the one that walks around here in a fantasy land like you're going to get brothers together, 6% of brothers together to take on the most powerful country that's ever existed on the face of the earth, period, bar none. And you want us to go up against that beast. You think the white men are just going to turn stuff over, turn money over, turn land over because you have aggressive asking? Is that what you think? Oh, it's about the money. Man, shut up. Shut up. You don't even know why people do things. You're a doctor. You don't even know why people do stuff. Go back and read Bernays. Go back and read propaganda, how the mind works and how they get people to do things. Go back and read why culture is important. Why you can't get fascists or fascism to take hold in the United States, but you can in Germany. What's the difference between a liberal country and an authoritarian country? How come China can do stuff with its citizens? Russia can do stuff with its citizens. Germany can do stuff with its citizens that America can't. Called culture. But you don't know enough about it to even speak on it. You poo-poo on it, but the thing is you can't debunk it because you think you can just buy people. It don't work that way, sir. I don't know where you get that. I don't know where you can actually prove that. If America could force people to do something, they would. Hell, the Chinese is authoritarian as the Chinese are. There's only so much you can force people to do. Hell, if COVID taught you nothing, you cannot make people do what they don't want to do. If the majority of people don't want to do it, it's not going to get done. You couldn't get the majority of fucking people to wear a goddamn mask for any price. Even though the United States dumped like $12 trillion in a year, they still couldn't get people to comply. Shit don't work that way. I don't know where you get your political education from. All I can say, man, stick to what you know. This ain't your lane. If you really want to get into your lane and start studying this stuff, start figuring out why people do what they do and why structure matters, why environment matters, why culture matters, and how an environment can affect a culture differently. Go read Quigley's book, The Evolution of Civilizations. That's a good start for you. It's a good primer. That'll give you a good idea how civilizations are actually built. I'll also give you a good primer of admixture. But anyway, man, I try to get to your videos, especially when you're trying to give facts or debates, man, and basically you're all over the place. I have a hard time getting through it. which is the last couple of videos that you had. I had a hard time getting through it because your facts are not correct. You're not accurate. You're not consistent. You're not accurate. Your arguments are basically mostly baseless. They're emotional. And you're a man of science. Come on, man. Get into the lab. Give me an argument. Give me an argument that's backed up with data and statistics and accuracy for a goddamn change. And then we can debate. And then we can go back and forth. I didn't replace you. I didn't replace you in Soul and Black. Dr. Johnson is not here to replace you. Dr. Johnson has a different mission. I have a different mission. I could care less about your arguments between women. I could care less about that. Women are a byproduct. You really want to understand women? Buy the book, The Lucifer Principle. One of the best treatises on the behavior of women that I've ever read. And he compares women to what? To animals and insects and stuff like that. Female nature in its rawest form. Try that. Unless you want me to read it to you. You know, you might not have time. You're so busy and all. But that's my rant. That's all I got. When you come up with some facts, you come up with some data and statistics, holler at your boy. Until then, man, you go do you. With that, that's all I got. This is BGS out, and I'll see you guys on the next one.